Well, the Christchurch City Council has for a long time been of the view that there has to be support for different cultural groups within the community to come together and celebrate that culture with the wider community. So this is very much about bringing people together. It's not about one culture versus another culture, and it's not about Kiwis versus migrants. It's actually, there are people here who live in Christchurch who've come from a variety of backgrounds. Let's celebrate those backgrounds and learn more about each other's cultures from each other in the best way that we know how. And that's why the Christchurch City Council has invested in festivals like Diwali, like the Japan Day, like the Korea Day, like the Lantern Festival, so there are all of these different cultural activities, and the City Council sits in behind in the way that it can in terms of offering support. I know that the community boards that come together on the western side of Christchurch, Riccarton Wigram Community Board and the neighbouring Fendleton and Waimairi, they support the Culture Galore Festival, which brings all of the cultures together. I think that was the first time that I experienced the Holi Festival, but now it's now the Holi Festival has got its own festival and its own.
Christchurch is learning to accept migrants?
Oh, I think so. And actually, in many respects, the disruption of the earthquakes has enabled people to come into the city and perhaps integrate far more quickly because they've come in with jobs, so they're already connected to the economy in a very, real way. But it means they're working with people that have lived and worked here all their lives, and so they're automatically connected. And for a lot of migrants moving into a new city, that often isn't the case, that they're not coming with a job, they're coming with they come on a visitor's visa, and then they look around and they find that do they qualify for a particular job. And actually making the steps to integrate into a wider community can be a bit difficult. But now I think that because such a large number of people, particularly from the Philippines, and I mean there are people that sort of kind of look like they might have been born here from Ireland, for example, but they're just as homesick as anyone else. They get just as isolated as anyone else, and it's actually building that sense of belonging that comes often from actually entering the workplace. And as long as there's a willingness, and I think because of the earthquakes, there's a real willingness to accept the gift of friendship from people who will hold out their hands. So I remember the Korean community, for example, coming to the eastern side and putting on Korean barbecue for people who didn't have power and a lot of services. Look, people will remember that. So I think Christchurch is much better now at being a place where everyone is made to feel inclusive and welcome on a social level. I think that things that have a historic relevance in terms of things that have happened a long time in the past don't have to mean those things if we don't choose them to mean those things. I think that people have not taken the view around the name of the Crusaders in terms of reflecting back. I mean, I'm certainly aware of it. I know my history, but it hasn't been an issue, and I actually don't think that it would be an issue because it's not focused on what the Crusades were about. It's actually focused on the idea of crusading for victory, and that's what it's about. It's about a game of rugby, and I don't think that people have taken it to mean anything else.
So it's not about Crusaders as such, it's just about optics. So like if society accepts migrants, so optics also slowly and
Yeah, but
slowly.
sometimes people claim language so that they don't actually end up in a situation where they create conflict, where conflict is not required.
Yeah, okay.
So quite often, for example, there would be there were people who've been oppressed in history. So take gay people, for example.
Yeah.
They chose to claim language that was being used against them in order to make it positive and supportive of their identity. And I think that's the same. We can claim the word Crusaders not for its historic meaning, but for its present day meaning, which is to crusade for victory in a game of rugby. And I think there's no need to create there's no need to create debate around the historic meaning when it doesn't have that as a present day meaning. That's my point. Quite often people who are oppressed will claim the language of the oppressor in order to claim their own identity and their role in society. But that's my personal point of view. It's not a city council point of view. Well, that's not true. The construction sector also requires an entire
logistic support.
Right behind it. So it's not just that. And if you actually look at our migrant populations, the health sector has brought in a lot of nurses from the Philippines, and also doctors from different countries. But also, if you look at the farming sector, you know, the dairy industry would be ruined overnight if we didn't have migrant workers. But there are people who, as a former Minister of Immigration, I can say that the scenario of driving taxis was actually driven off the fact that people were getting points for their qualifications, but they didn't have registration to act in their profession. So they weren't able to register with the medical profession, they weren't able to register as nurses, they weren't able to register as architects and engineers and various other things. So where you're required to have a registration with a professional body, now you don't get your points until you've got the registration. So that ensures that people can go into the jobs they're qualified for, but that doesn't mean we still don't have highly qualified people driving taxis. It is anywhere in the world. So this is not about Christchurch or about New Zealand. Anywhere in the world you can get into a taxi with a highly qualified migrant who's come to that country to make a better life, and often it's for their children rather than for themselves. So this isn't a Christchurch, New Zealand issue, but yes, Christchurch is taking this very seriously, which is why we are going to soon be releasing our multicultural strategy, which is Jimmy Chen has worked very hard as a councillor to bring to the fore, and he'll be bringing that to council in the next, I think, 2 or 3 weeks. So it's not very far away, and that's going to be an opportunity for us to have a debate about what we can do. No, I haven't been involved in it. Jimmy Chen has led it. He's worked with other councillors and with the migrant communities that sit around the table with him. He's got youth representatives, he's got representatives across the board, and they will be bringing the strategy for debate to the council table, and that's where we begin that process of thinking about what happens after the rebuild, what happens when the economics of the situation that we're in now changes. How do we ensure that the people who came for the rebuild are enabled to stay beyond the rebuild and actually make a life here in Christchurch, New Zealand? Christchurch City Council is not capable on its own of making that sort of difference. But we have developed a multicultural strategy. I haven't seen it yet because it's coming to council in the next few weeks, and Councillor Jimmy Chen is leading that process. But that is the point at which the council can identify what it can do to ensure the sort of economic future of the migrants who have come and want to make Christchurch their permanent home.